thank you for standing by. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All lines are muted until the question and answer session. At that time, you may press star 1 to ask a question. I would now like to turn the call over to Tiffany Fairley. Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon. I'm Tiffany Fairley with NASA's Office of Communications. Engineers and technicians have completed the rollout of the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft to Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida and have successfully powered up all elements of the integrated system for the first time. The rocket and spacecraft will undergo one of the final tests known as a wet dress rehearsal before launching the Artemis 1 flight test around the moon. We'll start with an update on the preparations for Artemis 1 wet dress rehearsal. First, we'll hear from Tom Whitmire, Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, NASA Headquarters. Tom?
Okay, hey, thank you, Tiffany. And we've got a couple other folks here. Charlie will talk after I'm done, and we have program managers and our mission managers, so if we get any difficult questions, we'll introduce some of these other folks. First of all, the Mega Moon rocket sitting at the pad, it's powered up, and it's getting ready for its wet dress rehearsal. Charlie will talk to you a little bit about that in a few minutes. This is our last design verification prior to our launch at a design level, and it is a test, so I have to kind of note that we could learn something during the test, and we'll take the data and we'll address the data as we get it. As you know, it's the LCC, the Launch Control Center, to the pad, through the mobile launcher to the rocket and the capsule and back. From my perspective, tanking is a very interesting process. Liquid hydrogen's at a negative 450 degree Fahrenheit, liquid oxygen's at a negative 273, so it's very cold substances. And I used to participate in this back in the shuttle program days, and it's like watching a ballet. You know, you've got pressure, volume, and temperature, and you're really kind of working all those parameters to have a successful tanking operations. This is, of course, there's thousands of components of the mobile launcher that need to perform. If you take a tour of the mobile launcher, you walk from the top to the bottom, you'll go through multiple levels, and you'll see all the different types of valves and pumps and electrical connections and commands and signals. It's a very complicated piece of machinery by itself. And so we'll really be trying it out with the rocket through a tanking operation. We do both core stage and upper stage. That's new for us. When we did the green run out at Stennis, it was just the core stage. And so that delicate balance I just mentioned earlier will actually be done with 2 separate volumes as we go through the process. Now, as you all know, a little less than 2 weeks ago, we actually rolled out to the pad. For us, it really was an iconic moment. It was a very special thing for those that were there. You saw the pictures of the rocket as it rolled out, and there was a lot of fog, actually, so some of it was a little obscured. By the time we got to the pad, it had a wonderful picture with the moon in the background, and I thought that was super cool. We had 7,000 people there. I don't know if you saw the pictures of this. That was as exciting to me as actually seeing the rocket. These folks are the folks that have worked on this rocket, technicians and their family, and we really spent a lot of time talking to them as part of these activities. And what we do in our industry is if something really special, like the first time iconic rollout of a launch vehicle or a successful launch takes place, we congratulate people and then we thank them. And so we spent a lot of time congratulating and thanking people a little less than 2 weeks ago. There were a lot of people who weren't able to join us. This rocket touches every state in the United States, and it also have international partnerships, what we think are very important. And so for right now, for today, for those folks that have helped us with the design, the building, the testing, the assembly of this Mega Moon rocket, I want to also congratulate you, and I want to thank you. And Charlie used these words before. I'm going to steal some words from Charlie. I want to thank you for your dedication. I want to thank you for your support, and I want to thank you for your hard work. We really appreciate that. There are no extra parts on a rocket. We don't fly extra parts. There's no unimportant task. Everybody who's involved in these activities, no matter who you are, what you do, or where you're located, we really genuinely appreciate you. We really feel that you're an important part of our team, and we really are grateful for the work that you're doing. So we'll get ready to do our wet dress rehearsal. I'm getting ready to fly down. I think I was just talking to Catherine here. We're just going to fly down Thursday morning, and I'm looking forward to that, Catherine, here, because it's very cold in D.C. For the folks that are in D.C., it's a very cold, even though the cherry blossoms are out and past peak. It's very cold. It's much warmer in Florida. We'll be down there. Of course, Charlie and her team are all down there already and getting ready to do this test, and we're looking forward. We'll have some meetings on Friday, and then this Sunday we will have the wet dress rehearsal, and we're really looking forward to that. By next Monday, we'll get back together with you. We'll talk to you, let you know how it went and what we saw during the test. I'll have to forewarn you a little bit. There's two parts to the question. One is how did we do with the test, and Charlie will talk about that here in a few seconds. The other side is we've got to take a look at the vehicle and see how it did. We will have a crack in TPS or something like that. So we'll take a couple of days to really evaluate not only the success of the test, but if we saw something unusual that we need to address and, kind of fix up. So it's just be patient with us. We will have a teleconference on Monday. We'll tell you everything we know at that point, and then we'll let you know what additional information we have to collect before we get ready to set a launch date. And that's all I had. Tiffany, I'm going to go ahead and let you turn it over to Charlie to kind of talk about the specifics of wet dress rehearsal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. Next, we'll have remarks from Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, our Exploration Ground Systems Artemis Launch Director from NASA Kennedy Space Center.
Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's certainly my pleasure to be here today and to talk about our progress toward wet dress rehearsal. I think it was about 2 weeks ago that we were talking about roll, and so it's been a really good 2 weeks here at Kennedy Space Center and out at Launch Complex 39B. So we made our successful journey to the pad back on March 17th. Folks probably remember that our roll started at about 5:47 p.m. Took us about 10 and a half hours to make it out to the pad, and we were hard down at Launch Complex 39B, or Pad B as we call it, at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The team has been working really hard. We got right into our pad connections and our validations. Once that was completed, we had some program-specific engineering tests that we did, primarily that revolved around the communication systems. That was completed. We powered up on the 21st. We had all of the flight elements powered up for the first time at the pad. That was a really great milestone for us. We finished up some of our servicing operations associated with the booster over the weekend. And so here we are today with our wet dress rehearsal preps in work and our team preparing for wet dress rehearsal to begin with our call to stations on Friday. So our wet dress rehearsal is a 2-day test. It closely follows launch countdown. There are a couple of minor differences, but they are, in fact, minor between wet dress because, as Tom said, it is a test, so there's some things that we are trying to evaluate as part of that, and I can talk a little bit about that as we go through this briefing. But we'll go primarily, this is about loading the vehicle. It is utilizing the ground support equipment, the services, and the commodities out at Launch Complex 39B, along with the command and control system here in the LCC, getting through those loading operations and then getting into the terminal portion of count. One of our other objectives, of course, is to utilize the elements of our launch team, both our launch control team and our support elements that some are here at Kennedy, some are at the range, some are our flight control team, our Orion MER, and our support teams for SLS that are in the SCSC back at the Marshall Space Flight Center. So that's some of the objectives of our test. As I said, it does run about 2 days long. It emulates our launch countdown and really begins on the first day with power up of the elements and the beginning of some configuration of those and preparing for cryo load. Somewhere around the L-minus 38 hours or so, we will get into our Orion power up and our configuration of the Orion comm system. We have an opportunity in there for the flight control team to do some commanding to the vehicle. Then after that, we start doing our pad configuration. That's a lot of how I like to characterize it as big steel moving. It is getting the flame deflector configured. It's removing handrails. It's any of our configuration of the pad itself. We'll transition our ECS system over from air to GN2 and get prepared for our tanking operations. We do, the MMT meets about 8 hours prior to our anticipated T0, evaluates where we are with respect to readiness for tanking, and just after that, the launch director will give the decision to the team on whether or not to go tank the vehicle, and then we'll pick up with our tanking operations in earnest. As Tom described, we load both the core stage and the upper stage with cryogenic commodities, and once that is complete, we have about an hour and a half of operations that we do, some other checkouts that we'll perform, and then we get down into our final hold point, which is at T-minus 10 minutes. We will go through our final preparations there for terminal count, do our polls, and then prepare to pick up with that. So that's kind of an overview of the operations that will happen during wet dress in terms of how we get down to terminal count. We do have a couple of runs through terminal count that are planned. The first one will go down. We have a planned hold point. We will hold inside a terminal count for a few minutes there, and then we will count down to about 33 seconds, and then we will cut off. We will come back to 10 minutes. Again, that's part of our demonstration. We want to make sure that we can go through all of those recycle operations. We have done that many times in the lab. We've done that against models, and we've done it during the countdown sequencing test, but certainly it'll be a little bit different this time because we will have cryogenic commodities on board, and there are some configurations that we'll do as part of that. We will come back through terminal count a second time, and then the plan is to terminate just inside of 10 seconds. And I think that's really all I have for opening remarks relative to the overview of the test and the work that's been done since we last met and talked about our operations.
Thank you so much, Charlie. On the line, we will also have available for questions John Honeycutt, Space Launch System Program Manager, NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, and Howard Hugh, Orion Program Manager, NASA's Johnson Space Center, and Mike Serafin, Artemis 1 Mission Manager, NASA's headquarters. And now we'll begin the question and answer portion of the teleconference. You can enter *1 on your phone to be entered into the queue at any time. Your mics are now on mute, and the operator will open your mic when we're ready and close your mic after you've asked your question. We ask that you please stick to one question and identify to whom your question is directed. If we have time, we'll allow reporters to ask a second question. Again, you can enter *1 on your phone to be entered into the queue at any time, and you can enter *2 if you'd like to be removed from the queue. Shortly after we conclude, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference online. We'll go ahead and begin with our first reporter, Mr. Bill Harwood, CBS News.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all doing this. Really just a real quick question at the top. PAO has told us we can't listen to any of the countdown loops prior to terminal count because of export control. Can someone give us some idea of what's being protected here? And I'm asking that because, you know, we listened to shuttle counts back in the day, and we hear the loops for Antares and Atlas V well before terminal count. I just don't understand what's different about SLS. Thanks.
Yeah, Bill, this time I can take that. I know it's probably frustrating. They will actually have online milestones that you'll be able to follow on social media. So I think, and you'll have good visuals. You know, and export control is a significant consideration for our program. This is the first flight of the rocket. Typically what they're looking for is timing and sequencing data, flow rates, temperatures, how long it takes to do certain tasks. That's considered to be important information by other countries, and so we have to be very careful when we share data, particularly for the first time. You know, I've had a chance, like you did, to do a lot of shuttle program launches. We were very fortunate. We had worked through all the very specific details details on what can and cannot be provided to the press during those events. And I'm sure in this program, as we work through this wet dress rehearsal, we're actually going to talk to the export control people and share with them what we think is acceptable data, and then they're going to verify that it is acceptable data, and we hope by the time we get to the launch, we'll have a really good understanding. But I have to tell you, Bill, we're really, really super sensitive to cryogenic launch vehicles that are of this size and capability, are very analogous to ballistic type capabilities that other countries are very interested in. And what they're specifically looking for is timing, sequence, flow rates, temperatures, anything that would help them or other folks could potentially be used to help other people do similar things. And as I mentioned before, this whole complex interaction between loading up two volumes, a core stage and an upper stage at the same time, there's a sequencing that's associated with that so you don't cause undue stress to the vehicle, for example. And so we are being cautious, an abundance of cautiousness, particularly in the environment that we're in nowadays, to absolutely make sure we're not missing anything. I do apologize on behalf of the agency and Tiffany and everybody else involved. I know this is probably a little frustrating for you, and I really appreciate your consideration. I do promise you that we're doing everything we can to verify we have the correct data to allow us to provide as much information as possible for the launch, because we actually would prefer to be able to do that, but we have a responsibility when it comes to this type of technical data. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Thank you so much, Tom. Next, we'll have Eric Berger from Ars Technica.
Hi, all. Really appreciate you doing this, and good luck. Can you talk about your expectations for timing? I think Charlie said this would last about 2 days, and I realize it's not 1967, but in looking back at the countdown demonstration test for Apollo 4, which is kind of analogous, it took 17 days. So I'm just wondering how confident you are completing the test within a couple of days. Thank you.
Yeah, Charlie, I'll let you start with that. I might add a few more words. That's a great question, though, Eric.
All right. Well, let's see. With regard to how confident we are in the timelines, I would say for the nominal test, the nominal timeline from call to stations to get into tanking, I feel very confident in the timelines that we have established in terms of the work. But as Tom talked about, I mean, this is a first-time op, and it is a test. And so I am certain as we go through things, we will learn. And certainly if we have any kind of issues or that we have to go address, I mean, that could drive the timeline. I think 2 days is a reasonable amount of time. Of course, if we were to have an issue where, we had to come back and repeat it, there would obviously be a few days in between while we get reconfigured, we get commodities replenished, and we get ready to go again.
I would agree with Charlie. Yeah, Eric, I have to go back and look at that history. We're actually, we went through at Green Run at Stennis. We didn't have all the permanent capabilities we have at the Cape, and so we were limited in some areas, like commodities replenishment took longer between attempts at Stennis because it's not really designed to do full stage testing. So the advantage we have is we have highly capable spheres and cryo lines and everything like that. So Charlie has much more operational flexibility to address any issue that might come up and give us in a position where we can attempt another attempt at the situation. So I think that's the one thing I would point to, is that with the infrastructure at KSC is very good. The people we have a lot of experience over years doing this type of work. They're highly capable, and the systems themselves allow pretty good flexibility in terms of doing another attempt. So we're hoping that will work on our advantage. And I also feel that Charlie spent a lot of time getting ready for this test, which is important. And we did have the experiences at Stennis that helped us understand the rocket, in my opinion, and I think John would agree with us, was invaluable for getting us ready to be at the Cape and then verify the systems there. And Charlie, anything else you want to add to that? That was some of the thoughts that went through my mind.
Yeah, a couple of things. I would also say that, we've taken a very incremental approach in how we've prepared for this test. So if you think about, we did a countdown sequencing test. Again, that's in a dry environment, so you don't get the cryogenic aspects, but you certainly get the countdown piece. We followed along during Green Run operations here in the Launch Control Center. We took the lessons learned from Green Run and the data, played that against our command and control software. We had V&V of the cryo skids and the cryo system that's out at Pad B. And so when you take all of those pieces, we've tested all of the individual pieces. We've also run the software through a number of different simulations, along with the team through a number of different simulations. So I believe in terms of methodically laying out the timeline and the plan, I feel like we're in a good spot. Again, it's the first time that we've done it in this particular configuration. So, I mean, there is definitely an opportunity to learn some things, and certainly as we do, we'll incorporate them into our preparations and planning for launch. We also have a 2-hour window that we can go work with if we run a little bit late, and we really have a little more than a 2-hour window. I would also offer we're managing to about the 2-hour window we would have on a launch day, but certainly, on a tanking day, you have a little bit more flexibility there as well. So I believe that we're in really good shape as we approach this test.
Yeah, we're all knocking on wood. It's a great question, and I think we've done everything we can to get ready for it. We'll find out soon enough how we did. We'll find out on Sunday too. So, okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Lauren Grush with The Verge.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm curious if you learned anything from the rollout that might need to be addressed prior to launch, or was the journey to the pad more or less as you expected? And adding on to Eric's question, I'm curious if the timeline for the dress rehearsal does stretch beyond the first 2 days. Can you explain what kind of impact that would have on a potential launch date? Thanks.
Well, let me start, and then I'll let Charlie add to it. It was a very uneventful role. We did learn some data. As you know, we were taking extra data on some of the frequencies of the vehicle and stuff. We're still analyzing that. But in terms of the actual role itself, went very well. Charlie, do you have anything to add to that? That's the only thing that really struck me is answering Lauren's question.
Let's see. I probably have a couple things. One of the things that we did, and I'm sure John Honeycutt may want to comment on this as well, but we did the dynamic rollout test, which meant that we took different speed profiles as we made this 4-mile journey to the pad. And as part of that, we collected data and we observed if we were how the vehicle was behaving and the ML was behaving at different speed profiles, and if we were seeing anything. We didn't see anything concerning across the speed profile, but what we did find is that there were certain areas where we knew that we were going to slow down. There were certain so out of that, I guess I would say the data that we learned from that is that there were probably certain speeds that were a little more conducive to maybe some vibration or some oscillation there. And so, we'll be taking that and we'll be incorporating that. Again, it all performed within family. We didn't have any issues that we were concerned about, but we certainly found that there were certain speeds that probably worked better than others. And so going forward, we'll want to roll that into our planning for our nominal rollout. That was what the test was all about. It was to go gather data so it could inform us going forward. And so we'll certainly take what we learned from that test and roll it into our plans as we get ready for future rollouts.
John, I don't know if you had any add to, it's kind of like if you drive your car at a certain speed every once in a while, it seems to rattle a little bit more. We try to avoid that speed. John, do you have any additional thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, Tom, Charlie said it well. We did pick up some areas that were a little bit more what we refer to as noisy in the data, and we noted the areas where, or the speeds where the rocket liked to move, sitting on the ML and the crawler, and we communicated that to Charlie, and she's going to incorporate that into her processes. From a data standpoint on the dynamic rollout test, the dynamic team shifted their work from the beginning of the rollout all the way to the launch pad, did an outstanding job, and the report we got back from the chief engineer, it was everything was nominal, so no issues there. Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have Marina Koren with The Atlantic.
Hi, everyone. This is a general question about the program that this test and this launch are going to kick off. So NASA says that it wants to create a sustainable moon program with Artemis. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and specifically about how that aligns with the fact that you're aiming for one lunar landing per year and maybe even less, which immediately, that cadence doesn't seem very indicative of a sustainable lunar exploration program. Thanks.
Yeah, Marina, that's more of an architectural level question. I have a counterpart that is Mark Karasich. I would ask Tiffany to kind of redirect the question to Mark to answer your question, because I think it involves more than just the launch system, and the rocket and the capsule we talked about today. It's kind of looking at the overall approach to NASA's, and they've got a lot of really good information that helps explain the timing and the sequence and the spacing, which is what I think you're interested in. I can tell you that we're certainly doing our part. During the shuttle program, we would fly the shuttle, but it was really important to also look at, what was the right timing and sequence to assemble the space station. So it's really the right answer to your question, which is a very good question, would require us to kind of bring in some other folks to kind of talk that with you. And Tiffany would be happy to kind of put you in touch with that, my counterpart, and I think they would be the right ones to answer that question.
Thank you so much. And Marina, yes, please feel free to reach out to me. We can put you in touch with the correct folks. Next, we'll have Gina Sansari with ABC News.
Thank you. I'm not sure who takes this, but do you have any weather constraints for the wet dress rehearsal?
Yeah, Charlie will have that for you, Gina. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, this is Charlie. I can take that one. We certainly do have a couple of weather constraints for wet dress rehearsal. We do monitor for lightning. We monitor for temperature and winds. I don't think that looking at the weather forecast for Sunday, I don't think we're going to have any issue with the winds or with the temperatures, but we will be looking at there is some chance that we'll have a little bit of inclement weather in this area over the weekend. And so what we look for is if there is a 20% chance or greater of lightning within 5 nautical miles for that first hour of tanking. And so we'll be monitoring that, working with the launch weather officer to look really closely at the forecast and see if we are susceptible to any lightning. But again, the parameter is a 20% chance or greater of lightning within 5 nautical miles of the pad. There is, again, wind constraints, that's 37.5 knots, and then temperature constraints are between 41 the temperature constraint is not less than 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think we're going to be okay on the temperature, and I think we're going to be okay on the winds, just looking at the forecast. We'll keep our eye on any thunderstorms that might be in the area. Certainly we expect that we'll see some activity maybe in and around the Saturday timeframe. So we'll monitor that closely as we get close to tanking.
Thanks so much. Up next, we'll have Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good afternoon. I wanted to follow up on Bill Harwood's question. Since you're not providing the commentary from Launch Control, I was curious what sort of updates we can expect over the weekend while you're conducting the test ahead of the briefing on Monday. And then also, do you expect to be able to provide that commentary when it's time to do the actual Artemis 1 launch this summer? Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, that's it. I know this is really important information to you folks, because I know you follow us very closely. They'll have on the website, I've been told that they'll have everything from major milestones from call to station through the actual completion of the test. It'll be data very similar to the data y'all had actually it's more data than what we had for wet dress rehearsal when we did the green run test at Stennis. What we're looking for is just to make sure that and we'll have the opportunity to verify that we're avoiding any specific timing, flow, other types of things that would inadvertently give an indication towards specific characteristics of the operations that we're going through. And so I guess Tiffany, I think we could probably, Jeff, just to make sure you and Bill and everybody else who are really interested, we'll work that offline so you can see exactly what will be available for the wet dress so you'll know what to expect. And I do promise you that they're going to actually practice the whole thing that we will have for launch in parallel. And so we're really hoping that by the time we get to the launch, we're working very hard to be in a position to be able to provide the normal type of calls that you would expect to hear. I know that sounds pretty conservative on our part, but we're really trying to be careful to make sure we don't inadvertently provide specific data relative to the vehicle that would be inappropriate. So I'll ask Tiffany to get to you and Bill offline, Jeff, and anybody else who's interested. We'll provide the specifics of what kind of stuff you will see posted so you'll know how to share this with other people. And, of course, we'll have a press conference the very next day, and we'll run through all the details of the things that we're allowed to talk about. I just think there's really a degree of conservatism and being careful on any real-time providing of data that could inadvertently provide timing or sequence with regards to the operation. And so that's my long-winded way to say it, saying we'll be offline and we'll make sure you have an exact knowledge as to what will be provided.
Thank you so much, and we'll be happy to follow up with that. Up next, we'll have Steve Gorman for Reuters.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to double check something. Maybe you explained this at the very beginning. I missed this, but so on the blog it says that the entire wet dress rehearsal is scheduled for April 1 through April 3rd. I assume that includes the call to station. And then also I'm curious. You said that the wet dress rehearsal is going to actually begin that's a 2-day process. It includes the tanking. That's going to begin on the 3rd, which is Sunday. If it's a 2-day process, that means that it concludes on Monday, which is April 4th. So is the wet dress rehearsal running from April 1 through April 4th, or I'm just not sure of the timing. And also, since you're going to be briefing everybody on the outcome on Monday, again, that would assume that the wet dress rehearsal is over by then. Could you sort of clarify that for me? Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. So our call to stations is on Friday the 1st at 1700. So at 5 p.m. We will do our call to stations. And then then it is a 2-day test. So the test will complete. Our targeted end of test window is somewhere in and around about 1440, provided everything goes to plan. Again, we do have that window, so that can change a little bit, but that'll be on Sunday. So on Sunday afternoon, we expect that if everything runs to its timeline, that we would be getting down into our terminal part of count, finishing things up, and then getting into our drain operation somewhere in and around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, starting on Friday evening, 1700, 5 p.m. call to stations, hopefully around 5 p.m. on Sunday, we are getting ready to get into our drain ops. And then, as you said, a out brief on Monday.
Yeah, and this is, let me add to Charlie, there's one logistical thing. I should have probably mentioned this earlier. We are going to provide you with a countdown timeline. We're working out some final details on that. You will get that here very shortly. And so Bill, Jeff, and everybody else, I know you would be expecting to have that at this point. I apologize, we're working it out with Charlie to make sure we get all the information correct. So you'll have a general, it's confusing, I know, and we go through it. I'm pretty familiar with what Charlie does down there, and so we can kind of follow along, but it'd be better for us to get you that timeline in writing. We are working that. We'll have that to you here shortly. And so that you'll have that countdown timeline to look at for everything that takes place Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then the post-wet dress activities at a higher level. And then when you see the blog that comes up for the actual wet dress, it'll make much more sense. So I apologize we don't have that to you. We're working to get that out to you. Tiffany will have it here shortly over the next day or so. We're just working on some final details in the timeline. We always like to make sure we're fairly accurate on this stuff, and we're working through it. I know, Charlie, you know when we're going to have a timeline that we can share with folks how we're doing on that? Or
I don't have the latest on that. Let's see. Tiffany, do you have any information on the timeline?
Yes, we are working through it, and we are hoping to have it completed and ready to have publicly available, hopefully within the next day.
Okay. Yeah, that'll help you guys out a lot. So it's coming. We're working to get that to you. This is the first time we've done it, so we're just making sure we got everything correct in the timeline and it has the right information for you.
Thanks so much. Next, we'll have Philip Sloss with NASA Spaceflight.
Thanks. I think this is for Charlie. We heard that the booster hydrazine servicing was completed ahead of the time planned for the wet dress. So was there any talk about moving the test up one day? And did the servicing timeline for this, will it fit in the tight timeline you're going to have when you're in launch countdown or in launch countdown preps? Thanks.
And so that was a great question. We did finish a little bit early in terms of what we had laid out on the schedule. You know, when we laid out our timelines, we tried to go look at what do we think it would take best case and then look at for a first-time op for planning purposes as you pick your date for wet dress. So our servicing ops, as you indicated, finished up a little bit early. We did go look at options for accelerating or moving wet dress. Certainly, you know, wet dress is a big test and involves multiple centers and multiple entities, and so it, you know, once you find a date, you kind of like to stick to it. But we did go look at that. We had to look at that, of course, in conjunction with all of the things that are going on the range because of the support that we need from the range and then from a propellant's perspective as well. The second part of your question relative to what we'll learn and how we'll apply, certainly part of this path to wet dress that we've been working our way through, part of it was to go through and look at our timelines with these new ground systems, with the flight hardware, and determine what these timelines needed to be for launch. And so we will be taking the timelines, what we call the as-run timelines, looking at any lessons learned, and then applying them to our launch timeline. So I think it would be premature for me to lay out what I think that looks like yet, but certainly part of this assessment was to go through and evaluate all of that, take that data, again, combine it with the lessons learned, and then come up with what we think when we roll back out for launch, what is that roll to launch timeline look like?
Thank you. Next, we'll have Stephen Clark with Spaceflight Now.
Thank you for taking my question. I just wanted to clarify, what Tom was talking about with the export control. I think we had some of the countdown audio during the green run test at Stennis. Was that compliant with export control law? Was that reviewed, and why hasn't it been reviewed up to this point for the Space Launch System WDR as we're nearing launch? And secondly, also, if the WDR does conclude successfully and everything goes well on Sunday afternoon, what's the earliest date the launch vehicle could be returned to the VAB? Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, I'll take that, and it's a good question, by the way. Yes, it was, to answer your question, absolutely everything that you heard on the audio for wet dress rehearsal was cleared by export control. The vehicle configuration was a little bit simpler. I don't want to get into too many details on specifically what was and what wasn't on the audio. The thing we have going for us now is we have the full system integrated with an upper stage and a core stage and some additional aspects associated with launch control, which is different than test control, which is what we have for Green Run. So what you were hearing for Green Run was a lot less representative of an actual launch countdown from the perspective of the other aspects of the launch countdown. So I know it's, and then Kathy and I is with me up here, and we've talked about this a lot. We're doing everything we can do to get as much information as we can to you, and I do once again apologize for that, but we are having to follow the direction that we're receiving on the matter. And so we'll get you a countdown timeline, which is something we're just finishing up. There are some differences. We did have everything cleared at Stennis, and we'll try to get you as much information as we can for this wet dress, and certainly by the time we get to launch, I think we'll have a really what you would normally expect to see in terms of the data. It won't be apparent to you, but it will be apparent to us what are the things that are included and what aren't. And like I said, I really can't get into too much detail, but they do look for very specific items.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mike Wall with Space.com.
Thank you all. Just a quick question about Orion. What will it be doing during this test, or I guess rather, what will technicians and sort of monitors be doing with Orion during the test? Is it just a passive participant, or are you guys going to be kind of actively testing things with the capsule too? Thank you.
I guess Charlie could start, but Howard, this was after Charlie's done. We'll certainly let Howard talk about it too.
So just like we'll be doing for launch, we want to go through and do our Orion configuration for flight. So Orion will be powered up. We will get the comm system powered up. We'll communicate with the Johnson Space Flight Center. They'll be doing some commanding to the Orion spacecraft. We will go through all of the same configurations that we would on launch day. Again, while a lot of folks think about this as a cryogenic test, it is also a test of the entire launch configuration and also a verification of the timelines for launch, so we have a really good feel for what those will be when we come back out for launch. So I'll certainly let Howard jump in and talk about some of the specifics for Orion, but I would just close out by saying Orion's powered up. It's configured as it will be on launch day from a communication perspective, from an electrical command and data handling configuration. We'll have the hatch closed, and we will go through all of those closeouts that we would normally do for launch day. Howard, anything to add there?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Let's see. You covered it really well. This is a very good practice run for us for the launch day. We'll go through the sequence. We'll have our engineering team also supporting from Johnson Space Center as well, besides the flight control team. And of course, we'll do the normal activation that we would do on launch day, check out all the systems, and we'll be monitoring, of course, all our primary systems, power, propulsion, comm systems, and of course, our flight software will be fully running as well. And then, of course, we'll be doing the hatch closeouts that Charlie described. So overall, a really good opportunity for our Orion team as well.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have Will Robinson-Smith with Spectrum News.
Hey, thanks for taking my question, for chatting with us this afternoon. Question probably for Charlie. Will SLS and Orion need to be rolled back to the VAB prior to a launch date being set? And at this point, with how everything's going, is it looking more like the early June launch window from the 6th to the 16th, or the late June, early July window is probably more likely at this time? Thank you.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the work at the pad and then the rollback, and then I'll hand it over to Tom to address any launch date questions. So once we finish up wet dress rehearsal, we will get into our drain and our post-op operations. We have some deservicing ops that we will do. All of that is part of our nominal plan. We will roll back to the VAB as part of, we have some additional testing that we will do in the VAB prior to launch. And once we finish all of our objectives at the pad, we will be coming back. That is, again, part of the nominal plan. We'll finish up our final closeouts for launch in the VAB. We do have a little bit of testing there that we will be doing on our flight safety system. And then once all of that is complete and the vehicle is in the final configuration for launch, then we'll roll back out to the pad and for our launch operations. And again, the flow of ops once we go back out for launch will be very similar to what we had this time for wet dress. And let's see, Tom, do you want to speak to the launch date?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we really want to get through wet dress rehearsal. We'll have a pretty good, there's two things we're looking for. We're looking at the things that Charlie looks for, which is the success of the test. Did we get down to the count? How did we do? And then we're also having to spend a little time evaluating the vehicle. We hope in about a week after we're done with all that, a week from Monday, that we'll be able to go back, and I have to actually go talk to my leadership here at the headquarters and and talk that. And so we should be able to talk kind of what we're looking for in terms of launch opportunities at that point. And so that's really kind of the timeline we're hoping to follow. It's coming up pretty quick. I always tell people, it's, I could kind of give you some guesses right now, but I don't think it really makes much sense. We're literally going to have a wet dress rehearsal on Sunday. We'll come back and talk to you Monday, and I think we'll be much better positioned to give you some good information about what the path looks forward at that point. So I think from my perspective, that's really the best way to kind of answer your question is we'll be in a good position on Monday to talk about it.
Up next, we'll have Christopher Kokinos with Astronomy Magazine.
Great, thank you, and good luck this weekend. I think you may have answered the question I had. I've got a couple of quick thoughts, a couple of quick questions. So you're saying, this is, I guess, for Tom, that obviously we'll know better on Monday how things went, but we should maybe expect a launch window announcement the week of April 11th. That's the first question. And then I guess for Charlie, and it's not clear to me, when will the actual simulated countdown begin this weekend? Thanks.
I'll let Charlie do the countdown, then I'll come back, Christopher, and get back to the launch thing. Charlie, you can go first.
All right, absolutely. So the wet dress rehearsal itself, just like launch, I know a lot of folks think about launch and they think about it being those last few minutes of launch. But our launch countdown is just about 2 days long, and so similarly so is wet dress. So our call to stations, which for us is a big milestone because it is the time in which we are calling our teams, notifying them that the wet dress rehearsal test is officially underway, and that is at 5 p.m. on Friday. Just like launch, we have a couple of days worth of work to get into that terminal part of count, and that will be on Sunday. So just to kind of run through our timelines, we anticipate being ready to tank the vehicle somewhere around 7 o'clock in the morning. Again, that can move a little bit, but that's our target, is somewhere around 7 o'clock in the morning. And then just sort of following our timeline down, that puts us at about our final hold point, somewhere around 2 p.m. or so. And so then that would be, we have a 30-minute hold there, and so that would put you ready to resume into terminal count somewhere around 2:30. So when you talk about the countdown itself, the wet dress itself, I would tell you that officially starts on Friday afternoon, 5 p.m. But if it's the part that sometimes folks associate just that final last couple of hours or minutes even sometimes with the simulated countdown. So that'll be somewhere around Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and Christopher, let me add, so we'll do the test, and hopefully we'll be fortunate enough to be able to do the test on Sunday. Monday, we'll get together, we'll talk to you again. We're looking for two things to see were we able to successfully get through the timeline and the count and get the data that we need, Charlie needs, to be able to prepare for the launch of the vehicle. We'll also look at the condition of the vehicle, see if there's anything unusual or if we have anything else we need to do to prepare for launch. I'll be real specific with you. For example, we don't really plan on going back into the engine section after wet dress rehearsal. However, if we see something that we want to go take a look at, or feel that it'd be good to take, and it might not even be something that important, but it'd be something that we want to do, well, there's a timeline associated with that, and it's a couple, days to do that type of work. So we're really trying to understand that, not only understand the way that the vehicle performs during the actual test, but if there's anything that we see that would say, hey, we need to spend a little more time and we may open up a volume we hadn't really planned to open up in, or do an extra configuration check with the vehicle, we really want to collect that all together. And so over the course, after the test, over the course of the next few days, we'll have all that scheduled out and we'll provide it to you. The launch in particular is a high visibility event. A lot of people set their calendars for it. So we're being very careful not to just throw dates out there and then have to come back and tell you Monday that 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 really wasn't the right date, and here's the right date. And so you get a lot of people really making plans to come see the launch in particular. So that's why we're taking it a step at a time. This is an important test. We may learn something in the test, and it's something that we may learn might be with respect to how the test is conducted, how we do during the test, but we also might see something like a crack in the TPS or something that we have to go back and fix. We should have a pretty good idea what that looks like on Monday. We'll let you know preliminary what we're seeing over the next couple of days. We'll have another discussion, and we'll bring you back in for that. And then we'll really be in a much more comfortable mode to say, hey, this is when we're going to start and look to actually launch the vehicle. And we're just trying to be respectful and careful not to set the wrong dates for folks, because a lot of people are really interested in that, and they'll be making arrangements for it and that type of thing. So that's why we're doing it the way we're doing it.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Jim McKenna with Aerospace Tech Review.
Thank you. This is for Charlie. Is the entire wet dress rehearsal live in terms of the vehicle and systems at KSC and Marshall and Johnson, or are there some activities that are going to be simulated for safety or range safety pyrotechnics reasons? And if so, what would be the simulated activities?
No, we don't have any simulated activities that are part of this test. I mean, it is all with the flight hardware. It is with the software that is resident in the Launch Control Center or in the Johnson Flight Control Team and their software. So there is nothing that we are running against the simulator.
Next, we'll have David Curley with Discovery Channel.
Thanks very much. Charlie, I guess this is for you. Two kind of small little questions. When you detank, do you save the commodities? And if so, what percentage do you save? And how do you actually safe the vehicle? Do you pull a plug, or what do you do to safe it?
So our safing is handled in two ways. We have safing that is built into our flight software and into our flight computer, and so it takes care of a lot of the safing on board the vehicle. There is also a set of safing that is done in our ground launch sequencer, and the two of them work in concert together. When we do a cutoff and we get into safing, there's a certain set of steps that are taken by the onboard software to safe the vehicle, and then a certain set of steps that are taken on the ground side as well. And let's see, what was the other part of your question? Oh, commodities, yeah. So we do save the commodities. We do drain back into the, we have an LH2 and an LO2 storage sphere that is out at the pad. We do drain those commodities back. Of course, just in the loading of commodities and in your replenish time, you do have some losses due to environmental conditions and boil off as you chill everything down. And so we do have to replenish. We have enough commodity in the LO2 sphere to support a number of attempts, probably two. Maybe three. We'll certainly, that's part of the evaluation that we're doing as part of this test, is to look at, what our modeled consumption is versus what our actual consumption is. And so for LO2, we're in really good shape there. For hydrogen, it's a big old hydrogen tank, and certainly it takes quite a bit of commodity there. And so we do have a replenishment plan that takes us a couple of days to turn around. Although we drain back from the vehicle, because of those losses, we do have to take some amount of tankers to get replenished and ready to go again.
Thank you. We have time for one final question, and that'll be Ken Kramer from Space Up Close.
What I'm wondering is, for Charlie, can you talk about the backup days if for weather or technical reasons you don't get to go on the 3rd? What are they? And then if you have to, related to that, if you have to interrupt this WDR test, how many days do you need in between to recycle and try the test again? Thank you.
So it really depends on when you interrupt the test as to how much time it takes to reconfigure and be ready to go again. If you decided that prior to tanking that we had something that we wanted to go look at and we elected to not tank the vehicle, you could, in theory, provided that the range was available, you could go delay. We have what we call a delay before tanking, and you could try again the next day. If you had started your loading operations, it really is dependent upon how far you got into that hydrogen load, how much you consumed, and how much you need to replenish. And so those scenarios range anywhere from you could go replenish within a day or two up to about 4. So we'll be looking at that depending on, if we don't get all the way through to the end, we'll certainly be looking at what that turnaround time is. But what I would tell you is that it is highly dependent upon when you made the decision that you were going to stop and try again. And it's anywhere from about 1 day to about 4 days.
Thank you all for joining us today. You can listen to a replay of this teleconference online by visiting the Media Resources tab at www.nasa.gov/Artemis-1 later this afternoon. The SLS rocket and the agency's Orion spacecraft, along with Exploration Ground Systems at Kennedy, will be the backbone of NASA's Artemis missions that will pave the way for future missions with astronauts as we prepare to explore the Moon and Mars. To learn more about Artemis, follow our progress online at www.nasa.gov/Artemis-1. Thanks again, and that will conclude our call.